Okay. Hello, everyone. We are so excited to have you here today, joining us for this special Mother's Day Women Heart Live event. Today, we are honored to share the story of a mother and a daughter whose lives were forever changed by heart disease, as you can imagine. But yet, they turned their experience into something powerful and impactful and are advocates for other women like them. Please join me in welcoming Women Heart champion Claire D'Andrea and her daughter Larissa D'Andrea. Today we are going to have a really honest and heartfelt conversation and I'll be asking some questions and we'll hear about their journey with heart disease. So, welcome Claire and Larissa.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start with Claire, with you first, and have you tell us a little bit about your story with your diagnosis journey, like what happened and what led up to it, and how you found out that you had heart disease in the first place.
Okay, well, believe it or not, my journey started about 28 or 29 years ago. I developed high blood pressure at the age of 42, and I was not a diabetic. I never smoked. I didn't have family history of any early heart disease, but I started on medication right away. And then shortly after that, my husband lost his job. And what ended up happening was we had to move across country, which was a terrifying thing for me. Larissa, at the time when he lost his job, was a sophomore in high school. And we were able to stay on the East Coast in Massachusetts for 1 year. So my husband moved out to California, and I stayed back in Massachusetts with the kids. And during that time, it was very stressful, as you can imagine, raising three kids, doing, dance, skating, soccer, running around. Plus, I worked full time to help financially because when a partner or someone loses their job, it is very difficult for everybody involved. And you do everything you can to keep life going, right? So eventually we did have to move, which I didn't want to do. But prior to the move that year, when we lived apart from my husband, I had jaw pain. I had jaw pain and neck pain. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor said it's probably muscles. So then I went to the dentist, and the dentist said, well, you have an abscess. So I had root canal, I had a cap put on. I still had that pain, and I still had the shoulder pain, the neck pain.
Mm.
The dentist then said, well, I think we have to do oral surgery. So they literally slit my jaw open under my tooth and packed the roots from below. And I still had it. So no one really had an answer for me. And I dealt with that for probably 6 or 8 months before we even moved. And at that time, I didn't realize that probably was what my issue was really my heart. So we moved to California in, I think, August of 1997. Um, we came into a house that was older, and it was like horrifying for me to have to do all these changes and renovation and get my kids into new schools, get new doctors. And it was really heartbreaking for me because my older daughter had graduated high school. Larissa had to move her senior year in high school. And I know that's a really, really tough time. We had offered her the opportunity to stay back east and finish, but she chose to come with us. And then my son was going into seventh grade. So, not easy times for kids. So, I got settled in, and I decided I was going to start working out again to get myself back in shape because I was really tired all the time. I was really short of breath all the time. And I thought, you're just out of shape. And I guess I should add that I'm a nurse. So those are the things that I thought that maybe I'm depressed because we moved across country. I'm just out of shape. I haven't taken care of myself. So I started walking a lot. We lived in a hilly area. I had a lot of indigestion. And I thought, aha, well, I'm eating too much orange juice or drinking too much orange juice or drinking too much coffee and it's too much acid. So I stopped those things. And then I didn't go to a doctor yet because I had taken care of my kids for doctors and dentists. So we moved in the end of August of 97. I didn't get to my own doctor until January. And I did that only because I was walking up a hill. I got excruciating pain between my shoulder blades. I couldn't move, had a difficult time breathing. And once I caught my breath, then the pain went away a little bit. I walked back home and I came in and I told Mark, hey, this happened. And we both said, well, maybe you're just out of shape and it's a muscle spasm. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. So I made a primary care appointment. I told her about it. I'm blessed that I had a wonderful female primary care. Did an EKG right away, so I didn't have to wait like other people. And then it was normal, but she wanted me to go to see a cardiologist. I had just started a new job at that time, and I didn't make the appointment right away. So in my new job, I had to travel, and I was running through the airport, and that pain came back again. And I continued to get on that plane and fly back to Boston to go to a meeting. I was doing cardiovascular research. And when I got home, I realized I need to make an appointment. So I did. I had a wonderful female cardiologist. And the day I met her, she said, I'm going to do a stress test. And she did. I couldn't do 3 minutes on the walking stress test. That day, she said, you're going to go home and have a cath done on Monday morning. She couldn't do it that day, otherwise she would have done it that day. And she said, here's a prescription for nitro. Don't do anything. Go home and just rest. Well, I didn't do anything on Monday. And we also did not tell the kids. We decided, it was scary. We just moved here. We weren't going to tell them right away, which probably was a mistake. Um, anyway, went home, didn't do anything that Saturday, Sunday. I was mad. And I was like, my dad smoked, he ate bacon, he drank, he did all these things. All of my older brothers and sisters are healthy. Nothing's wrong with me. So I cleaned, I did laundry, I did all those things. Monday morning, kids went off to school. We went to the cath lab. I used to work in the cath lab back in New Jersey. And when they injected my coronary artery, I realized I was really, really lucky to be alive because I could see how obstructed it was. So before they put the stent in, the cardiologist, Dr. Guarneri, called my husband into the control room in the cath lab, which I had never seen in my entire life. And she showed him my coronary arteries and why I needed the stent. And then she allowed him to come into the cath lab and give me a kiss, which
Oh,
was pretty amazing because as a nurse, I had never seen a physician support someone that way. So I had my stent and I had to stay in ICU overnight. My husband went home, and the first time I saw my kids was in ICU that night. So I'm sure it was a terrible, terrible shock for them. And I regret never having told them and prepared them. But that was my heart journey right now. That was 27 years ago. So I'm really lucky to be alive. I'm lucky I had two great female physicians that were really in tune with women and heart disease 27 years ago.
wow. So there's so much to unpack with that story, Claire. Oh my gosh. So, here you were as someone, in healthcare, you were working in the space, and yet again and again and again, and we know now these are pretty classic symptoms for women and heart attack, so we know that now. So, can you talk a little bit more about like how that impacted you having a heart disease so young, getting diagnosed so young, and how that affected your thinking about women and heart disease?
Well, I guess I was afraid I was going to die. That's the first thing that came into my mind. Um, that I like I was lost. I really felt lost. I think I ended up getting depressed. Um, every ache and pain I had after that, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. So I was worried that I wouldn't be there for my son to graduate. I set goals. I set goals that I would see my son graduate 8th grade and that I would see my daughter graduate high school. I've far surpassed those goals. But looking back at that time, it was like, how come I have heart disease? What happened? Why would this happen to me? My blood pressure was the only risk factor. My cholesterol and everything was all normal. So everything that I had been taught in nursing school that, men have these symptoms, they have the jaw pain. I never was taught about women. So I think I did a lot of reflecting back on that. And then I was working with male cardiologists at the time in research, and they were all like, well, did you have breast cancer? Why would you have this? I wasn't really overweight or anything like that, and no family history. So nobody could really uncover what it was until I started just thinking about life and stress. And that's when I realized how much emotions impact our health. So I started talking about it with people at work. And then in the hospital that I worked in, people would say, "Hey, we have this other woman who has heart disease. Can you come and talk to them?" So I think I've transformed over the 27 years from that shock to having blessings and looking at the good things, but also looking at things in my life that I could change for secondary health reasons.
Sure. Yeah. So, there are a lot of things that I know people talk often about life before heart disease and life after heart disease and how different it is and how, there can be like initially a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety and then we get to the new normal and acceptance. So, I'm glad to hear you talk about that. So, Larissa, we just heard your mom say that they didn't talk to you all about what was going on, and and then it was a big surprise to find out about her heart disease. And we know when heart disease affects a person in a family, it affects the entire family. So can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with this?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I'm like tried really hard not to cry about it.
Mhm.
I think it was not only surprising, but I think I've been, I have two siblings who are all amazing, but I've tended to have like a much stronger emotional reaction at times to some of these things. So even in the future, down the road, when my mom had her carotid on, I was usually like, they have to like very carefully tell me. So um, it was I was 17 at the time. And so I
Mhm.
think, having this teenage brain and not totally understanding it and just being like, okay, this is weird, and kind of just shoving it aside is a very different emotional processing than I had as I kind of got older, and certainly went through the sort of carotid operation and others. But I think what's fundamentally important that I took away over time, and I don't even think I realized it until much later in my life, was being an advocate for yourself and your own care. And
Mhm.
I saw that through my life with my parents, my sister and I having, being ill or other things and doctors not knowing what to do about it. So forever, I've seen my parents really advocate and say, I need to figure out what's wrong. I trust in my own sort of knowledge and body and everything else, and experience, and really advocate. And so I think that's like what I've continued to take away is really just be very present and understand what's happening, the stress. I know I've always been a high energy, high stress individual. So that's always been something that my mom and I have talked about. But I think it looks very different in reflection of that sort of teenage brain versus as I, grew older as an adult. And I think every year that goes by, you sort of learn more things about how to talk and how to advocate for yourself, and then how to also talk to other people who, whether you know them or not, but around in your life when you sort of recognize things that they might or should push further in their own healthcare, essentially.
Well, I want to talk to you both in a minute about all of that, like how this has impacted the work you do in terms of advocacy, in terms of helping and supporting others, and Claire certainly is a Women Heart champion. But before that, Larissa, I want to go back to you and say, so you talked about talking to other people, but how do you feel like this has it improved or has it impacted the conversations in your family about heart disease?
Actually, it's really interesting. My mom has always been an advocate, particularly because the symptoms and other things, really present differently in women than they do in men. So we have some of those internal conversations. But more recently, I'm actually getting married in July, and
Congratulations.
thank you. My fiance, when I first met him, he was having a lot of symptoms, and immediately I was like, I think you have some cardiac issues. You really need to go to the cardiologist. And he went and almost immediately had a stent put in, and then ultimately had to have a cabbage in um, early last year, so early 2025, which is crazy. Again, not overweight, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, all of those things, but has had a lot of high stress as well. And so and he will say to this day as well, but I think having gone through that experience with my mom and knowing what she went through, her symptoms, her sort of health journey, and then just being more cognizant of it, put me in a position to be able to say that to, to my fiance, and to help him kind of on his journey. So it's kind of a weird full circle thing, to be honest.
Well, it is interesting how, like, once you have this experience, you can, like, before you have this experience, you don't really see it, like with all the jaw things that were happening. And you think, okay, that's my jaw, that's my teeth, and that's not, and the fatigue, well, I'm tired, I'm just moved, to like all these things that we play off. And after, unfortunately, after something like this happens, we often are like, okay, now we're aware of these things. But we say, I think sometimes you can save people's lives that way.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, it's nice to hear that has helped the conversation in your family, and really impacted that. I want to go back, Claire, to more about you becoming a WomenHeart champion. So you could have you were very busy and very active, and you could have just decided, okay, well, I'm going to just keep doing what I do, but to get healthier and stuff like that myself. But you decided to also help other women. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I ended up losing my research job. And then when I went to see my cardiologist, I told her I'd lost my job and they had a position that was coming available in her place, enrolling people into a lifestyle change program. So in 2002, I went to work with her, and she had gone to a conference where Women Heart was at and came back and gave me the information. And she said to me, "What are you going to do for women?" And I was like, "What am I going to do?" Like, I was struggling with my own emotions and, family and all of that. But I was seeing a lot of patients come through that needed support. So I started a group at the time. We created a focus group. I had about 30 people the first meeting, and then I found out about Women Heart. And so I called and I'm like, I have to do this. And that particular year in 2004, Women Heart was also doing national conferences. So they were having one at UCLA, and I was determined to go, and I registered and I went up, and I took some of the ladies from my group with me, and I just fell in love with the people. I felt like I was at home because I was with people that got me, that understood the scariness of having heart disease, the all the issues that go along with family and spouses or partners or whatever, and work, even in work, and the symptoms that you continue to get. So that's what got me into Women Heart, and so I've had the support group since 2003 or 2004.
Wow. That's it's so incredible that I think many women who become WomenHeart champions have that similar experience. It's like, I'm really busy and all this stuff, but I just don't want to see other women go through this stuff
Mhm.
alone. It's just
Yeah.
it's not okay with us to have other people not have the support they need. And so I'm very glad you became a WomenHeart champion,
Me
obviously.
too.
Yeah. And with that, Larissa, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit first about some of the mental health aspects, like the connection between the mental health and the physical health. And then Claire, I'd like you to add anything you would like to what Larissa says.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mental health and physical health are inextricably linked. And I think today we know so much more about that than we did even, 20 some odd years ago. And I'm 44 now. So right around the time that my mom was going through a lot of her initial cardiac and heart disease experiences. But I personally really struggled with a lot of mental health depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, a number of different things that I've struggled with throughout my life. And I think learning and seeing, particularly the stress aspect, seeing that impact, which hasn't, I don't think, until more recently been as well understood, what that actually does to your body, what the cortisol does to your body when you're under an enormous amount of stress and running around and trying to do everything that you need to do, whether it's financially related or anything else. It has such an impact on your ability to sort of function physically, and then of course function mentally. So to me, it really is not just about the, hey, go get some more exercise. It is about completely understanding your sort of whole self, and your holistic self, and understanding that there is that link between mind and body, and that mental health, and how you can actually train and treat the mind and take that time for yourself. Make sure you're honoring yourself and giving yourself that time and space to be sort of emotionally healthy, so that you can both manage chronic conditions, but also be in a position where you can sort of support your best physical health.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I mean, it's so
Great
so
job, Larissa.
true, right? It's so true, right?
Mhm.
That it just is, sometimes we forget, and, you know, so many people, I feel like, are under so much stress these days, and, you know, the stress, there's just a lot of stress in our country, there's a lot of stress in our jobs, there's a lot of stress in so many things we do, especially as women. So, you know, and it's inseparable from that heart health, that physical health. So we have to keep that in mind and find ways to be kind to ourselves. Claire, did you have anything to add about mental health and physical health?
Yeah. Well, I think she did an excellent job, and I'm really proud of you, Larissa, for the way you expressed it all. So you've learned a lot, and you've learned well. I think for me, a lot of what I went through was stress related, you know, moving across country, but it's not stress. I mean, stress is normal. It's just how we react to it and how we train ourselves to behave in a stressful situation, because stress is important. We want our heart rate to go up if we're going to be chased by a tiger, right? I mean, but you know, we can't live in that stressful state all the time. And so learning tools and techniques to manage that emotional state of hypervigilance is really, really important. And I thought I was doing that really well. But I'm just going to share, because Larissa brought it up. In 2010, my cardiologist listens to carotid arteries, and my carotid was 50% occluded in my right side. I was on, you know, drugs for my cholesterol. I was on my blood pressure medications. I was doing secondary prevention, lifestyle changes. I don't eat meat. I haven't eaten red meat at all since, oh, whatever, 1997, 1998. I do eat chicken and fish, but I thought I was doing things that were important. Um, she followed my carotid every 3 months, and in 2 years, it went to almost 100% occluded, despite being on a blood thinner, despite doing all of those things. And when I had when I had my stent, my LDL was 99 back in 1997. All my numbers were normal and way below standard at that time. So I had to look at stress as a potential cause for the carotid, because I was always, even though externally looking great and looking calm, I internalize a lot of it. And so my cardiologist said, you need to take transcendental meditation. I was like, no, I don't need that, but I did. I did. It wasn't my favorite, and that's why people have to find what works for them. And I also took training in heart math to learn about the connection between the heart and the brain, and the thinking, and you know, the rhythm of the heart and the brain. So I think our stress, even though we think we're not stressed, we are, and we could just internalize it. And for me, that's what I was doing, because during that time of the 2 years, there was a lot of stuff going on in my management job that I had that was such a high level of stress that we needed to do something about it. So I ended up taking meditation, and I've continued ever since. So I've been doing a good job with that. And I'm just going to share that during COVID, Larissa worked at a company that dealt with respiratory devices, and it was very, very stressful for them. And so she advocated for them to do a presentation on heart disease and stress, which is really, really important too.
Nice. Yeah, it's so important. And a lot of times we don't think about the impact of stress on our hearts, but it has a huge impact. And you know, I've been reading a lot about this, and some people get really overwhelmed with the thought of meditation, but there are things you can do just sitting at your desk, like stopping, taking a few deep breaths,
Mhm.
you know, or playing. Always say, like, aging myself. I grew up like in my high school, college years in the 80s. And so I'll shut the blinds, put on an 80s song and like dance around, or anything you can do, like stepping outside in nature, anything you can do that just brings you down, just even for a few minutes off that like kind of jiggy high of stress is always helpful. So
The monkey mind.
yeah, you like what?
The monkey mind.
The
Where you're
monkey
thinking all
mind.
different. Yeah. So, moving and dancing helps get rid of all of that. So that's good.
Yes. It's amazing how, like, I think for some people, like, someone asked me recently, like, is your mind racing? And I'm like, yeah, of course it is. Does it not race? Is that a thing? Like, who has that? Like, what? So anyway, one last question for you both, and then we'll sign off for the day. But okay, so I'll start with you, Larissa, and then Claire. This Mother's Day, if you could say one thing to people just entering navigating this new heart disease journey, what would you tell them?
I think the biggest thing is advocate for yourself and recognize that even in healthcare, whatever discipline you're in, um, not everybody has the same experience and background. And so trusting your body and trusting yourself and your own intuition, and then advocating. So if you're getting that no, or if you're getting something that doesn't feel right and someone's not paying enough attention, go seek others. And be really intentional and thoughtful about that, and influence, your loved ones or others if they're having the same challenge. But you really do need to advocate for yourself personally in healthcare.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you, Claire.
Absolutely wonderful advice. So what do I say after that, Larissa? As a healthcare provider, I think one thing I can add to that is that oftentimes people will come in and they're really angry because they've been from doctor to doctor to doctor.
Mhm.
And so the way that you come in and enter into a room with a physician or a nurse practitioner or a PA or whatever, if you come in angry, you will often hit walls. So taking that deep breath before you go into the appointment, do some grounding breath work, breathing, visualizing that it's all going to go well for you and that they're going to hear you. Because I think oftentimes we just create blocks when we go in angry. And I think for me, learning to release anger and have forgiveness will help a long ways on the heart journey moving forward.
Thank you so much. Another piece of wonderful advice, a couple pieces of wonderful advice. And if we can remember those things and remember the connection between our heart and our emotions and our stress levels, then I think we can do much better in staying heart healthy. So thank you for both of you for that advice. And I want to thank you guys. You were amazing. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your stories and for all you do to help others. We really appreciate that. And we want
I was just going to say thanks to WomenHeart for all you do to help us all too.
WomenHeart loves doing things like this. It's just, we're so lucky. I often feel that we're just so lucky to be able to help women and support women. It's just a wonderful thing, wonderful work that WomenHeart does. And thank you for being part of it.
I think the other thing I would add then too is that final advice is find the right community, right?
Yes.
So WomenHeart is a community.
Good one.
Good job building a community. And so seek those communities that will work for you, that you can actually lean on and leverage, both to sort of feel like you can have some shared experiences, but that you can also gain advice and insights from.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking before we started about being the WomenHeart champions and how that community is so caring and so wonderful. And, WomenHeart, if you are a woman living with heart disease and you want to become a WomenHeart champion, look into it. We have information on our website. We'd love to have you do that. We have a in-person training coming up in October in Rochester, Minnesota. But I want to also say, like, this whole discussion is so important because on Mother's Day, and we're celebrating Mother's Day now, and the mother-daughter connection, the mother-child connection, and talking about heart disease in the family. But this conversation is a reminder of the connection and the love and speaking up for your health, that, in families. and supporting each other. So to everyone watching, thank you so much for being here. And we wish you and your loved ones a very healthy and happy Mother's Day. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Happy Mother's Day.
Bye.